My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is a parent of three teens. They are also a board certified family physician. Within this episode, we discuss transitioning late in life. We discuss their non binary identity and what it means to them in their transition. We also discuss being stealth versus being visible. We also discuss promoting Black and trans visibility through their medical expertise. We discuss self love. We discuss transitioning at work. We discuss coming out to your family and friends. This was a packed episode full of good nuggets, full of good information, just a full on good episode. I hope that you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and I will be your guide throughout this journey on the show. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices will be amplified as we share our stories. Trans men of color are not monolithic. What that means is our journeys are not the same. We come from different backgrounds. We have different stories, family relations, chosen family, and most of all, we have different transition journeys. Visibility equals possibility. I like to say that all the time. We like to highlight on this show trans men of color businesses and entrepreneurs, parents, athletes, survivors, and many other issues and topics that are relatable to trans men of color in our existence. Dem Bois Podcast is not only a platform to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting, listening, and sharing the show. Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. My next guest is a non-binary trans guy, a parent of three teens, and a board-certified family physician. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, definitely. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. So my name is Julius Weaver. My pronouns are he, they. You can use those interchangeably. Yeah.
Great. So where are you located?
I live here in Ellicott City, Maryland, and I work in Columbia.
Okay. Nice. So the name Julius, how did that name choose you?
Oh, wow. I like the way you asked that question. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a story, actually. And it's actually part of the coming out process for me as a trans dude. I was walking past a mirror one day. I was at a vacation home. And it was one of those getaways where you, after some big events have happened, so you're doing some reflecting on the kind of quiet getaway. But I wasn't expecting it. I was walking past the mirror, and in front of me, I saw someone that didn't look like the current me at the time. It looked like sort of me, what I look like more now, a much more masculine version. And it stopped me in my tracks, and I kept staring and I kept staring. Like I knew it was me, but it was just it was just incredible. I was so happy when I saw this sort of very masculine version of myself. And the name Julius was whispered. I felt like just this, I don't know if it's whisper, but I guess that's just the only thing I can use in language to describe it. And it was really firm and it was comforting, and that's where Julius came from.
Okay. And how long ago was that?
About 3 years ago.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So you described yourself as a late blooming non-binary trans guy. You mind sharing your transition journey from like wherever you want to start, but like from the beginning to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I've thought that I was sort of a straight cis person for most of my life. I know as a kid, I was always labeled tomboy Born a girl, labeled a tomboy, hung out with the boys all the time, just felt like it was natural, had 4 brothers. I'm more athletic than them, if you want to go by stereotypes of what boys and girls do. And I felt very comfortable in that. I do think over socialization, as you start going through puberty and things like that, I adored my mom and sort of went that route, stayed very tomboyish, but never questioned whether I was, trans. And I came out about 10 plus years ago as queer. So I thought I was just and that's because I started feeling like I wanted to present more masculine than I already even was. And all the imagery around me was like, oh, then you are probably, a masculine lesbian, And so I came out as queer about a decade ago, lived that life for many years, and it just progressed. I just realized even through time that I wanted to connect more with being a man and being masculine. It was very tough for me, though, as I sort of had brothers and a father who were the examples of what men were. I almost felt like a bit of an imposter, thinking that I wanted to move more towards that. But it was just deep in my soul. I knew that was a part of me. And so I kind of put my toe in and said, I'm non-binary. I used they, them pronouns for a bit, came out to my family as that. But whenever people around me would use the word sir or he, if I was dressed very masc and they hadn't heard me talk yet or something like that, I felt euphoria. And other activities I was doing, that were so-called masculine, I started feeling this deep, deep sense of like just gratefulness and happiness. So that's when I started to realize there was also more there. And I started calling myself a non-binary guy, because I do think there are parts of me that are non-binary, but the guy part is very dominant. So I like kind of using both of those.
So you say you came out to your family 10 years ago. How did your family accept you? How did your family take the news, I should say?
Yeah, that was tough. I have to, how you think of a few huge points in your life. Like I've got some major ones, and that is definitely one that I think about. At the time I was married to my kid's father. We had a high school romance, broken up for a bit in college, and reunited. And so it was the whole, we're soulmates, known each other forever. We had 3 amazing kids, very tight knit family. So to start questioning my sexuality was a big deal. To start wanting to be more masculine was a very big deal. And I was never, ever a frilly person. I mean, there was never anyone that would say, oh, you wouldn't really see me in makeup or heels or anything that would say, you're super feminine. But I wanted to delve into that even more. And it just didn't fit with him. So we had to divorce. And I also had to tell my family, my extended family, my brothers and sisters, and my dad, who I'm very close to, who had known my now ex-husband for decades. So it was a big deal. It was a blow up of my family a little bit. And they accepted me. They didn't understand it. It was more like, we love you, of course. We're not going to reject you. But why are you, making such a major shift, was sort of the question in the back of our minds. And I understand that. I understand. And I shouldn't say that of all of them. I just think that there was some sort of like, why is this happening? I do feel privileged. I have a great family, and I do think they have always kept their arms open to me. But I do think that raised some eyebrows. And the hardest part was the kids, because of course we were married. We had a nuclear family, very, very hetero nuclear family. And so that was some undoing that had to happen. So that was the toughest part, I would say.
That's a lot. So one thing that a friend of mine told me recently, and it took some thinking, and it's true. And sometimes we take, oh, this is my soulmate. But something that a friend told me recently is soulmates don't always equal life partners. And that's true, right? And for me, right? It's different when you're going through it. So
I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Your ex-husband had any reconciliation since then?
Right. We had a bumpy patch for sure for a little while. There wasn't a lack of love. per se. It was just like, this is a new stage for me and you don't quite fit. And we imagined ways that it could happen, but the reality was there wasn't a place, there wasn't a space for him to fit. Now we are friends. Yeah, we definitely get along fine, and we raise our kids. But there was a rough patch for sure.
Yeah, definitely understand that.
Yeah.
I know I transitioned 10 years ago, and I came out to my son when I was going to transition. And my son, it's not the same for everyone. And my son was very loving. So I said, I'm thinking about transitioning. And he said, well, what is that? And I explained it to him, and his reaction was, let's do it. And I think that was based on how we raised him also. But my question to you is, how was it with your children? And how is it now with your children?
Sure. So, I mean, there would be two parts to it. So there was the one with me coming out as just being, hey, mom is queer, and I have to say, the kids are, raised as being very open, Black kids, of course. So, you have that sort of understanding of other marginalized communities, but there wasn't a whole lot of gayness and queerness around. And they were young, too. It was 7 and 5. I have twins, so the twins were 5. But I think really the hard part is they understood that this was a change with me that was going to mean divorcing their dad. So that part was tough. In terms of seeing me with someone at that time, with a same sex, in terms of relationships like that, I don't think that there was like anything that they scorned, because I think the generation we have coming up is very different from us. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're gay. All right, that's that's the way it is. It was more questions of why aren't you with dad? But when I talked to them about my gender identity and saying, hey, mom's non-binary, and now sort of even more, hey, mom also uses he as pronouns, that has been very, very almost like a shrug of the shoulders, like, okay, what are your pronouns? Okay, what do we need to, a few questions, like, what are you going to do? Oh, are you going to go on medicine or hormones or, and then watching things unfold. I feel like they have been my greatest supporters. You look out for acceptance everywhere else. And for a while I was, and then I realized, but the people who matter the most, these 3, they are so loving and accepting. And it's been a shift for them for sure. We've had some conversations, but the acceptance overrides most of it.
So how old are the kids now?
17 and 15.
Ooh, teenagers.
Yeah.
That's rough. So you trying to navigate your own life and their life, because it's kind of, in reality, it's almost like, because I say this about myself when I first transitioned, it's like it's intentionally going through puberty again.
I
So
tell
it's like you growing and learning, you changing, and they're learning their bodies and changing at the same time. That's a lot. I had 1 child and I couldn't imagine having 3 of them.
I'm glad I hear this sort of like it resonates with you, like, woo, because anyone raising teens has to kind of like, you clap each other on the back or give them a head nod. And it's not to say they're amazing people, but they're really trying to come into their own and learn what it is to be a young adult. And this world is not very kind right now in terms of a lot of things. So it's challenging for them. And when I tap into how challenging it is for them, as opposed to just sort of the authoritative, parent, but really tap into like, what are you going through and what's life like? I'm like, whew, this is a tough time for you guys. So, it's a lot. But to go back to the puberty part, it just makes me chuckle so much. I mean, I'm a physician. I prescribe hormones, and but it's different when you go through it. When I'm going through it, when I realize I'm transitioning alongside my son, who's coming down every day with a deeper and deeper voice, or he comes down with his shirt off because he's happy that he's getting these muscles, and I'm like, whoa. I'm transitioning right next to my teen son, a very similar kind of feelings. I know it's different for the first time for him, but I chuckle at the similarities.
Do y'all have any comparisons? Do you do any comparisons? Like,
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think so. That's another thing about transitioning, because there is sort of the physical, but then there's also the social. And I have for most of their life, and I'll always be their mom, but I have for most of their life have been sort of the traditional mom, right? The cis woman or mom. And so that part of our relationship is still um, developing, right? Sort of that kinship of guyship, right? I've always been mom, and he's got a dad who's the guy that they sort of talk about certain things with. So that's something that's still yet to evolve, and will in its own sweet way, because I'm not a cis guy, I'm a trans guy. So and that's my story. It could be different with other folks, but there is something to be said about sort of the differences with socially transitioning versus just versus the physical changes with your own kids too.
hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Bois Inc. I am also the host of Dem Bois Podcast. As you may know, Dem Bois provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO@DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode. I think that's very interesting because I follow some trans parents on Instagram, or I know some personally, and it's the switch from I'm not your mom, now I'm your dad. So for you, is it with your children, you still identify as their mother and they still call you mom, or how is that for your relationship?
Yeah, so I made a decision to keep mom as my name with them. I know that's not the decision all trans guys make, but we've created a world where we get to do what we want. And it resonates with me that I'm their mom. They came out of my body. They've been raised most of these years as by their mom. And I almost didn't want to remove that part from them. And as long as they're respectful with pronouns, understand that I don't go by any feminine other terms, and they get it, they know that I'm not a woman, and that they're not going to refer to me like that. And they are with their friends. It's interesting. It's not that they meet their friends with this, you have to change, you have to make sure you use the right pronouns. They just softly correct them if it happens. I was with my son, and one of his friends was saying she, or I can't remember if it was a teacher or a friend or someone, and he just repeated their words and used the word they, like, just to kind of be like, no, like, my mom's pronouns are they. And so I won't. It's a little difficult to explain, but in the sense that they use the word mom with me, and that's their word, and that is how I identify with them. But all else is trans guy, trans non-binary guy, and that's how I think it'll stay. One part that we did have to talk about a little bit was safety. So I can pass now, and it's not that I need to or want to, but in some situations, safety is an issue. And so if my kid is saying mom, and then I go walk into a men's bathroom, that might be hard. And that did come up recently. And so those are the little things that we do have to talk about.
Yeah, especially in the climate in this country today, just in
Yeah.
general, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
legislation and all these things that you have to navigate as along with being a parent
Right.
is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is your advice to someone else who is a parent and they don't know kind of how they want to fit in? You know, they want to go with societal norms and say, hey, no, okay, just call me dad, but they may not feel that way. And, you know, all of
Right.
our journeys are different, right? And I love that you said
Right.
we can create what it is that we want for our lives.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your advice to someone who is a parent and they're trying to navigate societal norms, but, you know, being able to choose if they still want to be called mom or if they want to shift to dad? What would be your advice?
I think that what's wonderful is that to start from the idea that you can shift. And so if you're sitting down talking to people who are important to you and coming out, that you make them aware, this is what I'm trying now, you know, and we'll see. Or this is what I am now, but understand that the future can hold, you know, some changes. And it allows for growth. Um, and you're reminding yourself that you get to grow too, because so many things I'm sure this has to be with you and many other trans folks. So many things happen that you don't even think about or expect. You know, you have some things that you know are going to happen and others this is still an unfolding of who you are. And so making sure you're not too rigid. Because I know when I first talked to my kids about having top surgery, um, I told them and I explained to them, you know, it's just uncomfortable for me in the body that I am, in the way it is, and I want to have this surgery. And then we start talking about prosthetics and whether I was going to have other surgeries. And at the time I was like, honestly, guys, I don't know. I just know this is right now. And that's where we sort of left it. And the great thing about kids now these days is like, if you go to classes, it's like, oh yeah, this kid is trying out this name for this week. If you have an inclusive sort of welcoming school, you've got elementary schools where kids are trying out names for a couple of weeks or a month, or middle schools. And I love that because again, it's allowing for growth. It's not silly. This kid is not identifying with their birth name. They want to kind of see what feels right for them. And it's okay for them to change, you know? And so I try to approach it that way with my kids. And I think that anyone who's going into this should, hopefully they can too. And even to adults, even if adults aren't open to it, just saying, hey, these things can change, but this is where I am. And not to feel like a fraud because you're saying that. Because some people would try to say, well, if you don't know, then this is just a phase or this is, and it's like, that's not true. It's just not true. That's, you know, that's just old thinking, I think.
I agree. It's so funny, not funny, but it's strange how folks have a problem with children exploring their names and their
Mm-hmm.
gender identity, but you
Yeah.
allow kids to explore if they want to wear a tutu to school or if they want to wear green and purple socks. Like we
Right.
let them explore
Right.
all these other things, right? Or I don't want my sandwich with crust. Oh, you let your
Right.
kids do that. Or I only want cheese pizza, right? We allow
Right.
kids to explore all these other things, but limit them on the ability to explore the things that are important to their lives and their well-being as they grow into adults.
That's such a great point. Such a great point.
Yeah. So it's like we don't give children enough credit, right? Of
Right.
how intelligent they are and how they
Right.
know what they want. You know, it's
Right.
just the same as boundaries. We don't allow
Mm-hmm.
kids to explore the boundaries of like, hey, no, I don't feel comfortable hugging this person, or hey, I don't want to kiss this person. And we have
Mm-hmm.
forced children to do things that they don't want to do. But it's okay not to have
Absolutely.
crust on your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Come on.
Right. Like where
So,
does the line, where do we draw the
right.
line? And why did we draw this line but not the other? It's so invaluable. This is why I also like I have this mindset of the way trans folks push gender identity and gender diverse people push gender identity, it helps the world because it makes us realize all of these absurd lines that we have drawn in the sand. Like you're just saying, like, you must hug Uncle so and so. But yeah, what do you want for lunch? You know, like what and how do you want it? You know, so right.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about your career, but before that, I want to say, because I know how it is, right? Because I experienced it and I
Mm-hmm.
transitioned later in life as well. I started to transition in my early 30s. And
Okay.
so how is it transitioning, going and identifying as a Black woman, but someone's wife, someone's mother,
Mm-hmm.
now in society, being a Black man?
Oh my
Seen as a Black
gosh.
man?
Yeah. It's such a great question because it's so powerful. That shift, you kind of feel like, well, you're Black, right? Like, so that's, you're Black, you're still Black, but like there is a nuance to how the world treats Black men versus Black women. And that probably has been the most eye-opening to me. I mean, if you sit and think about it, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But to start to live it, it's like, wow. And so one, there is a privilege of being a man, period, Black, white, whatever. And I've experienced that. And when I do, it blows my mind. Like I talk about it because I'm like, wow, it's just so different. An example is just like bringing my car to go get it done, bring it to the same place all the time. But it is a busy shop, so they don't always know who you are. So it's not like they recognize me. The last time, as I start, getting a little more facial hair, a little deeper voice, change in face, I'm being clocked as a man. I'm being identified as a man. And the difference in the way that people treated me in the shop was just, I was like, why are you talking to me so much? Why are you explaining what you're doing? Why is this, this extra sort of like, we hear what you say and we take it as, gold, almost like this authority. And almost feels like as you walk through life as a woman, you have to prove everything. You're just immediately assume it's an assumption that you don't know what you're talking about. Even on the phone, if I'm treated differently, if people identify me as a man, it's definitely just a more, okay, let's get right with it. Let's do what you say versus it just feels like there's an extra pull as a woman that you have to do. So there is this privilege that I noticed, which I didn't expect because I was thinking, oh, Black man, there's not going to be privilege. But there is one. And there is also the racism that is pervasive in our society. And so what I love to say now is like, as a Black woman, the lived experience for many years was always one of dismissal. It was a not seeing. Go into a room, you're not talked to. You're just immediately dismissed because you can't be of anything importance, right? Until you start talking, throwing around degrees, things like that. So you have to prove yourself. But with Black men, it's not dismissal. You're met, I find so far, often with fear. And it makes me so sad because these are the judgments and the stereotypes of society. And they are based on gender as well, not just race. So I tell this story is where I was going to a hospital to make a visit. And I'd been there a few times that week. And they'd, yes, this is my legal name, but I am, such and such's parent. And this is the name I go by. And I had, one day it was sort of late. I had on just really baggy clothes. And this was honestly the week in my transition where all of a sudden I started not being misgendered. And I was all of a sudden being correctly gendered as male and clocked as male. And I walked past the desk really quickly. And it was like, everyone was up in arms. Like, whoa, where are you going? Who are you? It was just this fear in this voice. Like, who is this Black man walking down the hallway? And I was like, I turned around and they saw my face and they're like, oh, it's okay. Go ahead. And I was just like, but what I heard in their voice, it was fear. It wasn't like just irritation it was fear. And since then, I have seen that. I have seen people even move away a little bit. I've seen eyes that are fearful. I've seen, in all these different situations. And I catch it because it's not something that I fully felt as a Black woman. So overall, I don't want to say these two things as to say it's awful. It's just these are the nuances of now walking through life as a Black man versus a Black woman that I'm recognizing that I haven't had to deal with. Overall, it's wonderful because I love who I am. I love walking through life, but our society is a little messed up.
Little.
Yeah.
So you are a family physician and you've been board certified for 20 years, 20 plus years. And so this is going to be a loaded question. So bear with me. So you transitioned, you came out 10 years ago. And so that means when I think of a physician, I think, what we tend to think of higher folks in our society, right? We're talking about somebody that is the most educated, should be you went to school the longest, you paid the most for your education. I hope that if you're my physician, you wasn't a D student and you was an A student, right? So you think that physicians tend to have a better understanding of mental health? You have a clearer understanding of just health in general, right? Because they're responsible for taking care of our society. And so we would, I would like to think that the physician has a better idea of transitioning than a politician would, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so in your career, how has it been for you to transition mid-career or 20 years after, right, being board certified? So among your colleagues, how has that been at work?
Well, I carry a bit of privilege with this as well. So I came out as queer about a decade ago, but didn't transition till about 2 or 3 years. And honestly, that's still been a process. Uh, so the sort of shift to being queer, I was definitely in big organizations at the time. And that was bumpy because you're walking around. It's not as if you have a badge that says I'm gay. It's like people don't necessarily know. And so I think my biggest experiences were if things were said and then people didn't know that I was gay. Those were some of the hardest, especially with patients. But there were also beautiful moments where patients will say something like, "Can I confide in you? Like my kid is gay and I just have all these questions," or and not knowing that I'm gay, because I don't think they would have actually said that, right? Because they were basically voicing their fears. And then I was able to not necessarily even say, "Hey, yeah, I'm gay too," like to say, give them very sound advice as to things they can do, which is, ultimately love your kid. Like this is something maybe you need to do more, understand and educate yourself on. Um, so I didn't feel being gay. I didn't feel more discrimination than I had already felt as a Black person. I can just say that definitely 1,000%. I did start getting tapped to, speak or go to events as being sort of the Black queer physician, but I didn't feel like discrimination too heavily from colleagues. And then patients, there is that doctor-patient sort of authority and hierarchy. So no one was treating me in any kind of way. And if they said things that were sort of uh, um, ignorant about gay folks or comments, then honestly, I did easily correct many people. So where I say the privilege comes in is being in that sort of more authoritative kind of role. And then I have my own business now. So the staff I choose are going to be very queer and trans friendly. And so as I've transitioned, I've had the privilege of not necessarily working for anyone to tell me I have to do it a certain way. And that's been nice. I've been able to, what I call cocoon somewhat in my transition over the past few years. I've been able to sort of change my name. I'm not legally yet, but, tell people to call me this, use these pronouns. And they're usually people who work for me, or maybe someone who is coming to sort of get my services in another way, so those are all still in these positions of somewhat of authority. And that is a privilege I know I absolutely have. So it hasn't been extremely difficult in a professional setting, except for that I really would like to legally change my name. And I just don't look forward to all the paperwork that requires with like the professional licenses and things like that.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bois Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. pay our guests an honorarium. Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. So you like to promote Black and trans visibility through your medical expertise. And so that leads me to ask you about the RMD Proud. What is that?
Yeah, right now that's my baby. Yeah. I'm a bit of an entrepreneur. So I worked many years for big organizations, and then I decided to open my own practice. Never thought I would do this, but I have a brother who's also a physician, and he had his own practice. I had a very nice colleague who had opened their own as a Black female. And I was like, oh, I can do this too. And once I did, it just opened up the world of business for me, because I said, well, if I can do this, I can do other things. And I'd since run like a COVID-19 program, business that I ran during the pandemic really successfully. And as I transitioned, I realized, like, as I am transitioning and I see the terrible healthcare options that I've like had to kind of go through as transitioning, I realized, of course, other folks are doing the same. And other trans folks, other gender diverse folks are doing the same. And so, I put my expertise into something that I'm also very passionate about, because I lived this experience. So that's how I opened RMD Proud. I thought of it well before January, but it soft launched in January. It's an arm of my Resolve MD primary care practice that is a gender affirming hormone care program. And it's basically to get people in quickly who are interested in starting hormones, and for them to have a very competent, trans-friendly, competent, gender diverse, friendly experience. So my primary care practice, because it's mine, is a very personable practice. People know me very well. I get to know them, and they get an unrushed experience from a board certified physician. And that's what I want for trans folks when they want to transition with hormones. I don't want them to come to a place where people don't understand why they want to use their chosen name. I don't want them to come to a place where people mess up their pronouns, or have to really, really explain why they want to do it. I want them to be around a physician like me who gets it. I'm not going to gatekeep. You ready to start hormones? Let's do the things to get you on hormones. And I love the fact that my practice has the availability where people can get in rather quickly. And I know there's larger organizations that do this, but often the wait time's tough. Often the office staff associated with some of these programs are still not very competent. And then the last part of it is I'm Black, and I want this for my Black trans brothers and sisters and other siblings that don't identify on the binary. I want to provide not only trans competent care, but also racially competent, racially friendly care too.
That is beautiful. And you know what? I did not realize, and I knew this, right? But I wanted to hear from your own words. But I didn't realize how emotional that was going to make me. Because when I went through my transition, I went through a gender specialty clinic. Mm-hmm. And I had everything that you just described: competent doctors, competent staff. There was no questions asked, right? I was just, hey, you want to do this? Let's start you on, went through the steps, and I had privilege in that. And that's hence why I founded Dem Bois. And people do not realize how important that is to receive that care in the most critical moments of your life. In the beginning, right? When you're beginning a transition. And I appreciate you for doing that. And especially coming from somebody with experience of going through a transition and knowing exactly what it is that trans folks need, and saying, hey, I want to offer this service and use my expertise. I love that. That's amazing.
I think it's the least that I can do, because of how much this process has given me, and I'm sure you can understand too, like the sense of belonging that you feel when you start to identify with a group that's so deeply yours. That community the feeling of you're really moving into a place that you feel very comfortable with. And like I walk by a mirror and I smile, and I've been taught not to look in mirrors, that's vain, but I smile. I'm happy. Like it's the best start of my day to see that I've had top surgery, or to, and then every trans person that I get to interact with, I mean, that makes my day. So if I can give a little bit for being given so much, like even to interacting with you, like this is like to interact with another Black trans person, it makes my day.
So for someone that's listening out there, so where RMD Proud, where are you located? Is it virtual? Is it in person?
Mm-hmm. So I am in my practice is in Columbia, Maryland. However, most of trans and gender diverse hormone care can be done virtually. Actually, all of it really. So anyone who lives in Maryland can access me. I do carry other licenses right now as well. So there are a few other states that I can do this as well in virtually. So, and the easiest way to do it is hop on my website or go on our Instagram page and message us. And, I had someone sign up last week, and honestly, we were able to get them in within 24 hours and they got started on hormones. And so yeah, those are the easiest ways. And I also, the Black and trans visibility piece for me is really important. So I do talk about my transition and other trans facts and fun stuff, and Black stuff, on my IG page at the Trans MD. And that's again, just saying, hey, here's another Black trans person out here. You can kind of follow and see what's happening. And, so those are some of the ways you can reach us.
I like to say that visibility equals possibility. And when you see it visibly, and you know that what's possible in your life, right? We're not Black trans folks. We're not all these statistics that they try to say that we are, right? We're out here thriving. We're out here. Right. We're doctors. We're all these other things, right? We're physicians. We're lawyers. There are other pieces to us just than those things that people want us to believe that we are. And so that leads me to ask you, when we think about visibility, so how was your decision to be visibly trans, as opposed to just saying, you know what, I just want to be stealth and I'm just going to kind of stay in behind the scenes and not letting anybody know? What was that decision process for you to be visible?
Yeah, I think that is so important in our community. So many people say, I don't think I know any Black trans people, or I don't know trans people. I'm like, well, I think there's quite a few people that are stealth that you might have no idea. I mentioned privilege a lot because I do think I'm afforded quite a bit. I came from very humble beginnings, so I don't want to make it seem like I didn't, but I have a lot of privilege in this life. And, there are people who have to be stealth. It is probably easier in some respects. You just, for safety, to not be ostracized. But some of us have to be visible, because I never saw anyone like me growing up. And I wonder what would life be like if I had, I never saw anyone like me. And I want people to see me so they, like you said, they know what's possible. And so as long as I can, and in most places that I can, I will be visible. I'm happy to say I'm trans. Places that are unsafe, especially if it has to do with my children, then I'm not going to do that. But I decided, I'm so proud. And I don't know if it's because I'm late blooming. I'm so proud to be a trans person. It has given me so much to my life, that I want to share it. And I even overshare. And you mentioned before we started about being an introvert. I am also that way. And it surprises me how much I talk about this, or want to talk about this, or even post on my at the Trans MD. But I want to share. It's a beautiful journey. And anyone who's thinking of taking it, they have so much negativity out there that tells them not to. I mean, we think about what our kids have to face right now. There are laws that saying they can't exist, they shouldn't exist. I mean, that's terrible. So there has to be things that combat that. So that's hard. I knew as I transitioned that I would want to become a voice, and if possible, a very big voice, for trans people and Black trans people specifically, Black trans masc people as well.
Yes, I am an introvert. You may not be able to tell, but I really am. If you ask me a question or two about my life or my experience, because I talk you to death. You'll be like,
right,
John. Okay, that's enough. I can continue on and on and on, but I think it's very important that we share our stories. It is very important, and so politicians want to create all these rules, and you poisoning our kids. No,
right?
Is that we're just more visible now, and so kids know that there's other possibilities to this just linear process that we want kids to go through life. Right? What do? You go to school. You graduate, go to college, get married, have children. Like, no, there's more to life than just that process, right? There's more to life in your identity than just what someone else tells you to be. And it's because it's visible, right? Social media, just different things and avenues of how people can see how other people live.
Absolutely.
Shape your life in a way that you like.
Absolutely.
So is there anything like, last words or like anything that we didn't talk about or advice that you want to give to someone listening?
Well, I think one of them is I mean it when I say that I owe so much to my community. That's Black people, that's trans people, that's Black trans people, gender diverse folks. And so if there are people who listen to this podcast and they have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Just message, my IG page, or I can leave my email. I'm happy to answer them, even if you're not thinking of coming on my program, because there are initiatives that I want to start. I do have one, hopefully, that I want to get off in the fall, which has to do with masc people. So I don't want to say that you have to be trans or gender diverse. You could certainly be a masc cis woman. The uncomfortable experience of going in to get a pap smear or STI testing when you are masked, everything's pink, or if you're there and you have a beard, or if you're there and you have a deep voice and people are looking at you like, why are you here? I want to offer a clinic, a weekly clinic where people are able to come and have a very affirming place to come that's easily accessible and affirming to them. So I'm doing these things a lot, these initiatives would not necessarily cost. And so I'm saying that to say you can reach out to me with questions and not think, oh boy, but I have to be a patient. I just feel like I am there for the community in that respect. So I think I did want to say that. And then I did have a question for you about your podcast too.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I wanted to know where Dem Bois comes from, which I love the name, by the way. But I was just curious about the process.
The name Dem Bois? Oh, you know what? Nobody has ever asked me that.
Yeah.
That is a very good question. So Dem Bois originally started many, many years ago. I had a group of friends who were all masculine, centered women. And we had motorcycles, and we were going to start a motorcycle club, and it was going to be called Dem Bois. Yeah, and we never did that. We kind of fell out. Some folks stopped riding. Some folks never got their bikes. And so, we got the vest, we got everything, right? And it never happened in the way that I envisioned it. So I was the one who picked the name. And so I kept the name, and many years passed. And when it came time, Dem Bois was formed in 2016. And when it came time to start this organization, I started Dem Bois after I went through my own transition and recognizing the privilege that I had in transitioning, and to see other folks. And I don't want to say that I was naive to it, but I just thought it was everybody had the same process. I didn't know really, right?
Right.
And I started Dem Bois to provide financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to have gender affirming surgery. And I didn't know what to call the org. And then I thought about it. I'm like, wait a minute, I got this name from and then that's it. And then Bois. So that's how it came to be. Thank you for that.
That's wonderful.
I appreciate that question.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the part of the show where I like to ask the guest a question. So I have a random list of questions. So far, I have 31 random questions. And I come up with these questions just randomly. I might wake up in the middle of the night and be like, ooh, that's a good question. And I'll add it to my list. But the questions may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about today. But if you just give me a number and then I'll read the question.
Oh, neat. 7.
Number 7 is, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
That's a good question. I don't know why I'm thinking of so many. We watched so many cartoons. Maybe, I think one comes to mind is Thundercats. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
Wow. Why was that? When I was thinking, I was like, wait a minute, what was my favorite cartoon? I was thinking that in my head, actually.
Oh, wow.
That is crazy. Me and my cousin used to love Thundercats. Yes, I know what that is. Some of y'all other folks listening may have no idea. That just means we aging ourselves.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Though I feel like somehow I may have seen that again recently in the past few years. I'm not sure. I think one of my kids was like, "What is this show?"
Oh, that was the best.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was great. It was great. Mm-hmm.
Julius, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Thank you for being a guest. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come here and share your story. And thank you for everything that you're doing in the community. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me this time. I'm happy to do it.
So we have reached the end of this episode. I want to say thank you for listening to Dem Bois Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. Be sure to visit our website at dembois.org. That is DEMBOIS.org. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook. If you think you would be a great guest on the show, or if you know somebody you think would be a great guest on the show, there's multiple ways to request to be a guest on the show. First is you can go visit our Instagram page, click the link in our bio, and from there you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Or you can visit our website, click the programs tab up top, scroll down to podcast, click the podcast button, and from there on the podcast page, you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Yo, we need questions, y'all. If you have those burning questions, a question that you want to ask me or a future guest on the show, there's multiple ways that you can send in questions, right? So first, you can go to Instagram, DM us that question, or you can email us at hello@dembois.org. That's HELLO, like hi, at dembois.org. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share this show out with your friends and other folks in your networks. So until next time, take care.